Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's like this expectation of precision. It feels almost like engineering.
Right. It's very black and white.
Exactly. Like you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points to it and says, there it is.
Yeah, it's undeniable.
But when you step into the world of K-12 education, and specifically student mental health, suddenly that x-ray machine is just, well, it's broken.
Oh, completely broken.
We're looking at a landscape that is incredibly murky, heavily stigmatized, and honestly just widely misunderstood. So today's mission for this deep dive is to cut straight through that murkiness. We're unpacking a critical document about K-12 education. It's a brief from MentalSpace called Restoring Balance and Combating Academic Burnout.
It's such an important read, too.
It really is. And to start us off, we have to completely shatter a very persistent myth about how we handle stressed kids.
Yeah, and it's a myth deeply ingrained in, our cultural obsession with grit. We have this collective assumption that a struggling student just lacks discipline.
Right, the classic push harder mentality.
Exactly.
Like when a student is worn out, they're staring blankly at their homework, clearly hitting a wall. The standard adult response is almost always to tell them to just power through.
We treat their exhaustion like it's a test of character.
Yes. But the prevailing evidence in the source shows that pushing harder is actually what deepens the problem. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Think about it like a physical injury. Telling a burned-out student to push harder is exactly like looking at a runner who just pulled a hamstring and screaming at them to sprint faster.
Wow, yeah.
Not only is it unhelpful, it actively causes more damage to the tissue. You are taking a temporary strain and turning it into a permanent tear.
What's fascinating here is how perfectly that physical analogy maps onto the psychological reality.
Right.
We readily accept that a physical muscle has limits, that it requires rest and rehabilitation to function again. If a pitcher throws out their shoulder, we don't call them lazy.
No, of course not. We get them to a doctor.
Exactly. Yet, for some reason, we assume the developing brain of a child or a teenager has an infinite capacity for stress.
Which is just wild when you think about it.
It is. And so this deep dive today, it's about completely reframing how we view student exhaustion, shifting it away from that old paradigm, viewing it as a behavioral issue, and properly categorizing it as a recognizable, treatable condition.
Let's get into that strict definition then. Because childhood academic burnout is not just, being tired after a long Tuesday.
Far from it.
The source defines it as chronic school-related stress that has completely overwhelmed a child's ability to cope.
Yeah, that word overwhelmed is key.
It leaves them emotionally exhausted, increasingly cynical about school, and saddled with this heavy conviction that nothing they do is ever going to be good enough.
And that phrase, overwhelmed a child's ability to cope, that is the mechanical core of burnout. I mean, we all face stress, right?
Sure.
And in small doses, stress is an adaptive mechanism. It releases just enough cortisol to help us focus for a math test or perform well in the school play.
Right, the good kind of stress.
Exactly. But chronic stress means the system never resets. The alarm bell in the brain, the amygdala, is just ringing constantly.
Just nonstop.
Nonstop. And when that happens, the physiological coping mechanisms just break down. The most crucial takeaway from the text is that this breakdown is not laziness, and it is not a character flaw.
It's biological.
It's a profound physiological and psychological state of depletion. And society constantly misdiagnoses this emotional exhaustion as a lack of discipline.
Right.
And if that's left unaddressed, it rapidly slides into severe clinical anxiety or depression.
And I want to push back on this a little bit, or at least play devil's advocate for the parents and teachers listening.
Sure, go ahead.
Because on the surface, a depleted kid and a lazy kid look remarkably similar.
They really do.
If you are looking at a teenager in the back of the classroom and they're just staring at the wall, refusing to do their homework, acting completely cynical about the assignment, how do you actually distinguish between a kid who is just dodging responsibility and a kid who is in the grips of clinical academic burnout?
That is the million-dollar question right there. To tell the difference, you have to look past the surface behavior to the underlying mechanism.
Okay, how so?
So laziness is essentially a baseline state of apathy. It's a preference for inaction when action is perfectly possible. Think of a car comfortably parked in the driveway.
Okay, I can picture that.
Burnout, on the other hand, is the aftermath of action. It is a car stuck in the mud with the driver slamming the gas pedal to the floor until the engine overheats and starts smoking.
Oh, wow.
It's the friction of running an engine too hot for too long without any oil.
That distinction is crucial. So with laziness, the engine was never on.
Right.
But with burnout, the engine is destroyed from overuse.
Precisely. And when you misdiagnose burnout as laziness, you apply the wrong intervention.
You apply pressure instead of support.
Exactly, which naturally transitions us into spotting the actual signs.
Yeah, because we aren't just talking about a bad attitude here. The physical toll is massive. The text lists some really surprising physical and emotional symptoms.
This is pretty alarming.
Kids are presenting with exhaustion that a full night's sleep does not fix.
And that completely breaks the usual logic of just get 8 hours of sleep and you'll feel better.
Right. Because sleep repairs physical fatigue, but it doesn't instantly repair the chronic neurochemical depletion caused by long-term stress.
You can sleep 10 hours and wake up just as emotionally drained.
Because the environment hasn't changed. The source also mentions actual dread, like tears before school, chronic headaches, stomach ache,
Psychosomatic symptoms.
irritability, withdrawal, losing interest in activities they used to love. But at all the symptoms, here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Grades falling, despite real effort.
It's the ultimate tragic irony of burnout.
Imagine the psychological toll of that. You are a student trying your absolute hardest. You're studying late into the night, sacrificing weekends, and yet you bomb the test.
It's devastating.
The sheer terror of trying your hardest and still failing fuels that exact creeping hopelessness the source describes. But why does that happen? If the effort is there, why does the output collapse?
It comes back to the brain's executive functioning. When a child is trapped in a state of chronic stress, their brain is literally flooded with stress hormones.
Like cortisol.
Right. And those hormones actively impair the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain responsible for working memory, focus, organizing complex information.
So they're staring at the textbook, reading the same paragraph over and over.
But the cognitive machinery required to retain that information is jammed. The alarm bell is ringing too loud for them to concentrate.
They are biologically unable to learn.
Exactly.
So what's constantly tripping that alarm bell? The text outlines a few clear culprits driving this epidemic.
It does.
We are looking at heavy course loads, completely overpacked schedules where kids are jumping from school to tutoring to 3 different competitive extracurriculars.
With zero unstructured downtime.
None. Plus social and performance pressure. And then perfectionism acts as this massive internal driver.
And perfectionism is particularly insidious because it is actively rewarded by our educational system right up until the exact moment the student completely shatters.
Oh, man. That's so true.
We praise the student who stays up until 2 a.m. to make their diorama perfect without realizing we are reinforcing a behavior that will eventually destroy their mental health.
So the anatomy of the problems is severe. But now that we see the scope of it, let's shift to the hopeful news provided in the source, because balance can be restored.
It can.
The text outlines a specific evidence-based clinical toolkit, starting with CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, also stress management and coping skills, and specific support for that perfectionism.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, CBT is essential because it targets the underlying thought patterns that perpetuate the burnout.
Right. Take our perfectionist student. They are operating under a cognitive distortion where their entire self-worth is tethered to their academic output.
If I get an A, I am valuable. If I get a C, I am worthless.
Exactly. So when they get a C, it isn't just a bad grade. It is an existential threat. It triggers that amygdala alarm bell.
And CBT helps them identify that distortion.
Yeah. Challenge it and rewire it. And this is big, but therapy alone is not enough.
Right, because you can't just treat the kid in a vacuum and then throw them back into the exact same broken environment.
Precisely.
It's like a kid who's drowning because they're carrying a 60-pound backpack. CBT is teaching them how to tread water. It's a great skill, but eventually someone has to take some of the rocks out of the backpack.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. Systemic adjustments are mandatory.
Meaning the adults have to step up.
Yes, the source is very clear. This mandates realistic workload and schedule adjustments, alongside close family and school collaboration, all guided by a licensed clinician.
The environment itself must adapt.
It has to. But the logistical reality of doing that for an entire school is staggering. How on earth do you implement personalized clinical therapy, family collaboration, and schedule adjustments for every single student who needs it.
Individual care requires massive logistical support.
Exactly. Which brings us to how this is actually being implemented at scale. There is a concrete model for this currently operating in K-12 schools across Georgia, an initiative called MentalSpace School.
This is where the theoretical framework meets the practical reality of public education.
Let's detail the comprehensive services they offer, because it's robust. We are talking about same-day teletherapy. They assign dedicated therapist teams per school.
So it's not just a random voice on a screen.
Right. It's a team that knows the school's culture. They provide immediate crisis intervention, suicide, and violence prevention. But crucially, they also offer staff wellness support and family counseling.
The inclusion of staff and family support goes right back to the ecosystem approach. You can't treat the student in a vacuum. A burned-out teacher cannot effectively support a burned-out student.
That makes total sense.
And the logistics that make this work are critical. The therapists are licensed, diverse, and culturally competent.
Let's expand on that. Why is cultural competence such a critical piece of the puzzle here?
Well, because the pressure to succeed does not look the same in every household.
Right.
Mental health stigmas, communication styles, family expectations, they vary drastically across different cultures. In some families, getting a B is fine. In others, it is viewed as a deep disrespect to the sacrifices the parents made.
So if the therapist doesn't get that context,
The intervention will likely fail. The student needs to feel seen in their specific lived context. And beyond that, they outline the insurance coverage, which is huge for accessibility.
yes, let's talk about that.
They accept BCBS, Cigna, Aetna, UHC, Humana, Peach State, CareSource, and Amerigroup.
But here is the most staggering financial detail in the text. For Medicaid patients, the out-of-pocket cost is exactly $0.
$0. It's incredible.
I mean, financial barriers are often the #1 reason families don't get care. Ensuring Medicaid patients pay zero is so crucial for accessibility. It means this isn't just a luxury for affluent districts.
It removes the friction of getting care entirely. And on the administrative side, the system is designed to serve the schools themselves. It is fully HIPAA and FERPA compliant.
FERPA being the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, so a student's therapy doesn't become part of their permanent academic record.
Exactly, which is essential for trust. But crucially, the text notes this provides support for HB 268 compliance.
Right, House Bill 268.
Yeah, and there's a looming July 2026 deadline mentioned in the text.
So schools are legally mandated to have preventive infrastructure in place by then.
And a systemic solution like MentalSpace effectively provides the administrative infrastructure to keep the schools compliant before that deadline hits.
And we know it works because the source shares some hard data on the outcomes.
The numbers are striking.
89% improved attendance,
Wow.
92% reduced anxiety, and 85% family satisfaction.
Think about the real-world implications of a 92% reduction in anxiety. That means their prefrontal cortex is back online.
The alarm bell stopped ringing.
Exactly. They can actively participate in their education again.
By the way, the contact info provided in the source is mentalspaceschool.com, and the email is mentalspaceschool@cheapytherapy.com.
Good to know.
So what does this all mean? We've gone on quite a journey today.
We really have.
We moved from blaming lazy students to understanding the severe biological reality of academic burnout. And we've seen how comprehensive, accessible models like MentalSpace are actively reversing the trend in Georgia.
And as we wrap up, I'd encourage you, the listener, to take a moment and reflect. Think about the students in your own life right now, or even look back at your own past academic experiences.
Yeah.
How many times were you labeled as lazy when, in reality, you were experiencing an absolute depletion of your coping resources? Viewing those past experiences through this new lens structural support versus character flaws, it really changes everything.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
Yeah, it is. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on what we've discussed.
Okay, let's hear it.
The source shows that when we teach coping skills and adjust workloads for K-12 students, anxiety drops by 92%. It makes you wonder if an entire generation grows up learning these evidence-based boundaries instead of just powering through to the point of cynicism. How will that fundamentally redefine the toxic burnout culture of the adult workplace a decade from now?